It was a Tuesday morning that began like any other in Washington, D.C., tense, loud, and dripping with politics. But as the sun crept over the Capitol dome, it would soon become clear that today was no ordinary day. Over at the White House, Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, now one of the most recognizable voices in America, stepped onto the briefing room podium in a sleek red dress that turned heads. Her message that morning was crisp. President Donald J. Trump had officially signed a 145% tariff on all Chinese imports, igniting what experts were calling the biggest U.S.-China trade war in modern history. The administration's push to bring manufacturing back home was now more than just a talking point, it was law. As she delivered her statement with fiery conviction, a photo of her outfit began circulating online. And by mid-afternoon, it had gone viral. Enter Whoopi Goldberg, co-host of The View, a show known as much for its heated political takes as for its celebrity banter. That day, Whoopi didn't hold back. "I mean, is it just me or is the irony off the charts?" she laughed. "You've got the press secretary for the man who's basically starting a trade war with China wearing a dress that's made in China. Come on." The audience roared with laughter. The panel nodded in agreement. Joy Behar quipped something about hypocrisy in heels, and the segment went on. Social media, of course, exploded. Memes, tweets, and TikToks popped up in seconds. Hashtag Made in China trended nationwide. But here's the thing, they didn't know what was coming. Karoline wasn't one to roll over. She wasn't some passive figure tucked behind the scenes. She was Donald Trump's media sledgehammer, and her response would be something Whoopi Goldberg and the entire country wouldn't forget. Just a few hours after The View aired its segment, the White House issued a press release that simply read, "Tune in tomorrow. Same podium. New facts." Everyone knew what that meant. Karoline was loading up. The next morning, the press room was packed to the brim. Reporters, pundits, and even a few celebrities made their way in, hungry for fireworks. The air buzzed with anticipation. Karoline walked out calmly, again dressed to the nines, but this time in an elegant, hand-stitched navy blue number made by a U.S. Army veteran-turned-designer from Tennessee. It was deliberate. And the room knew it. She didn't wait long. "Yesterday, a certain daytime television host mocked me for wearing a dress made in China," Karoline began, her voice firm but composed. She believed it proved some kind of hypocrisy. What she didn't know or didn't care to ask is that the dress was purchased from a small American designer who, like many others, has struggled to compete with China's mass manufacturing for years. The tag says Made in China because that's what our government allowed to happen for decades. Until now. She paused. Cameras clicked. Every reporter was leaning in. "President Trump's tariff is about giving American creators, like the one who designed my dress yesterday, a fighting chance. My wearing it wasn't hypocrisy. It was a statement. And after today, that designer is moving his production to South Carolina. Because now he can afford to." Boom. A mic drop moment. But Karoline wasn't done. "As for Ms. Goldberg," she said, glancing directly at one of the front cameras, "maybe next time she wants to talk fashion, she should talk to the hardworking Americans trying to reclaim an industry we lost. Or better yet, come visit a textile factory in the Midwest with me. I promise it'll be more enlightening than The View." The press room erupted. Even a few usually skeptical reporters chuckled or nodded. And by noon, hashtag Karoline Claps Back was trending at number 1. Karoline Leavitt's clapback didn't just go viral, it detonated across America. The response to her fiery takedown of Whoopi Goldberg ricocheted across social media, talk radio, and news channels like a political thunderclap. Fox News aired the entire press briefing on repeat, with Sean Hannity calling it one of the most surgical verbal takedowns in recent memory. Even CNN, which rarely gave Karoline favorable coverage, couldn't help but acknowledge the intensity and precision of her statement. Don Lemon, now a freelance political commentator, admitted during a live stream, "She played that perfectly. I hate to say it, but that wasn't just a defense, it was a checkmate." Meanwhile, Karoline's dress designer, Ethan Brooks, a 37-year-old Marine Corps veteran and self-taught fashion entrepreneur, suddenly found himself inundated with orders. His website crashed within the first hour of the briefing. Orders from all 50 states came flooding in, and within 24 hours he had sold out his entire inventory. Ethan made an appearance on Fox and Friends where he humbly thanked Karoline and announced a bold move. "Thanks to the Trump tariffs and all the new attention, I'm bringing my entire supply chain back to America. I'm already working with a factory in South Carolina to produce our next line, 100% made in the USA." The story took on a life of its own. But on the other side of the cultural aisle, The View was in damage control mode. Whoopi Goldberg returned to the stage the next morning with a less cheeky tone. "I said something yesterday that clearly rubbed people the wrong way," she said, looking down momentarily. "Look, I still think it's fair to ask questions when people in power wear symbols that seem to contradict their policies, but I also get that I should have looked into the story before making fun of it." Joy Behar, however, wasn't ready to back down. "Sorry, but this is classic spin," Joy scoffed. She got caught in a contradiction and turned it into a campaign ad for Trump's trade war. But the American public wasn't buying it. Polls showed a sharp swing in public opinion, with over 64% of independent voters agreeing that the incident revealed the elitist attitude of mainstream Hollywood figures. In flyover states, particularly manufacturing-heavy ones like Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Karoline's popularity surged. And as if perfectly timed, President Trump himself weighed in with a Truth Social post that read, "Karoline Leavitt, absolutely incredible job defending American workers and exposing the phony Hollywood elites. We're bringing back jobs, not jokes." That post alone was shared more than 600,000 times within 8 hours. Back at the White House, Karoline continued with business as usual, but the firestorm wasn't over yet. That evening, Karoline appeared on Hannity for a full sit-down interview where she elaborated. "We're in the middle of a trade war that was decades in the making. China didn't just steal our jobs, they stole our leverage. President Trump is finally standing up. And the cultural elites? They can mock all they want, but the American people are watching." Sean leaned in. "Do you think Whoopi will accept your offer to visit a textile plant with you?" Karoline smiled. "I doubt it. But the invite's still open." That line alone became a meme. The invite's still open. It was printed on shirts. It became a rallying cry at rallies and speeches. For many, it symbolized a shift, a return of the cultural fight to Main Street America. As the dust began to settle, new questions started to rise. Was this just another viral moment, or was something bigger happening? Because beneath the memes, beneath the headlines, and behind all the political banter, something real was unfolding. The tariffs were real. The shift in public mood was real. And Karoline Leavitt had just gone from spokesperson to symbol. The days following Karoline Leavitt's bold press room statement saw a wave of unexpected consequences, not just in Washington, not just on cable news, but in towns and cities across the United States. In Rust Belt communities where textile mills had shut down years ago, families gathered around dinner tables talking about tariffs, not because of a politician's speech, but because of a dress. One viral clip posted by a mom in Scranton showed her 12-year-old daughter explaining to her siblings how tariffs work using 2 dolls, toy money, and an American flag. It was adorable. And it had over 5 million views in a day. The most striking shift, however, was in consumer sentiment. Online fashion retailers who had quietly been importing cheap Chinese garments found themselves fielding questions like never before. "Where's this shirt made? Is this dress produced under slave labor? Can I get the same style, but made in America?" It wasn't just fashion. It was a movement. Meanwhile, inside the Beltway, Karoline was getting attention from powerful voices. Senator Josh Hawley publicly praised her for reviving the conversation on economic nationalism. House Speaker Mike Johnson echoed that sentiment, calling her response a masterclass in turning culture into policy. Behind the scenes, Karoline was being approached by American manufacturers, labor union heads, and veterans groups. One particularly emotional moment came during a visit to a reopened garment facility in North Carolina. A 58-year-old factory worker named Dolores, who had been laid off in 2008, hugged Karoline in tears. "I never thought I'd see these machines running again," she whispered. "You made people listen." And listen they did. Across the Pacific, Beijing was not amused. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce released a rare public statement criticizing the weaponization of fashion for political propaganda. The irony was lost on no one, especially after Karoline posted a screenshot of that statement on X, formerly Twitter, with the caption, "When China's government is mad that you wore a dress, you know you're doing something right." Her post had over 1.2 million likes by the end of the day. But not everyone was celebrating. The View returned the following Monday with an entire segment dedicated to Karoline Gate, with Whoopi, Joy, and Sunny Hostin framing the whole ordeal as orchestrated outrage. Whoopi tried to reset the narrative. "I'm not saying she didn't mean well," she explained, "but you can't turn being caught in a contradiction into a presidential platform. She wore a dress made in China. End of story." But by then, Even some traditionally liberal outlets were breaking ranks. Politico published an op-ed titled, "The Dress That Dented Hollywood's Armor," which argued that the American left's detachment from working-class issues was on full display in Whoopi's mocking tone. For Karoline, the backlash was just fuel. She doubled down. In a second press briefing that same week, she announced the White House would be hosting an American-made showcase, a televised event featuring small businesses that had either returned from overseas or were launching new US-based manufacturing. "We're going to show America what rebuilding an economy actually looks like," she declared. Not from a talk show desk, but from the ground up. The response? Over 3,000 small business applications flooded in within 48 hours. Even reporters in the room, many of whom had been skeptical of the administration's tariff policies, began to ask new kinds of questions. Is this the beginning of a manufacturing renaissance? What metrics will the administration use to measure economic revival? Will Karoline Leavitt run for office someday? She smiled at that last one, but didn't answer. By now, Karoline Leavitt had transcended the typical role of White House press secretary. She wasn't just briefing the media, she was shaping national discourse. The Made in America dress incident had evolved from a media squabble into a full-blown cultural flashpoint. And it wasn't just between Karoline and Whoopi, it was Hollywood versus Heartland, elitism versus authenticity, and globalism versus economic patriotism. As the days passed, Karoline's influence seeped into unexpected places. In Nashville, a country singer released a ballad titled "Stitched in Red, White, and Blue," a tribute to American textile workers and a not-so-subtle nod to Karoline's dress. The chorus went, "It ain't just fabric, it's who we are, woven proud under 50 stars. From broken mills to rising skies, we're taking back our Made in USA lives." The song shot to #1 on iTunes within 72 hours. Meanwhile, social media was ablaze with everyday Americans showing off their own Made in USA purchases, some tagging Karoline, others tagging Whoopi sarcastically. The phrase "check the tag" became a trending hashtag, doubling as a political statement and a challenge to media elites. At the White House, preparations were underway for the American-made showcase event, and it was shaping up to be much bigger than anyone expected. Set to take place on the South Lawn, the event would feature over 100 small and mid-sized businesses representing industries from steel to sneakers, solar panels to sewing kits. President Trump himself was expected to give a keynote speech, but all eyes were on Karoline. That morning, before the event, she posted a simple photo of her new dress, this time hand-sewn by a group of single mothers from Indiana with the caption, "Back by demand. 100% American. 100% unapologetic." The tweet instantly went viral. Celebrities tried to ridicule it again. Comedian Sarah Silverman tweeted, "Is this a fashion show or a MAGA rally?" But this time, the backlash was immediate and brutal. One response that exploded came from a young Navy wife in Norfolk. "Maybe it's both. A rally for people who finally have jobs again. You don't get it and you probably never will." That reply got over 300,000 likes in one night, and then came the event. The American-made showcase turned into a massive media spectacle. With booths showcasing locally produced goods, live music by American artists, and family-run business owners giving interviews about their comeback stories, it felt more like a revival than a press event. President Trump's speech was fiery and defiant. They mocked Karoline for a dress. A dress. But what they didn't realize is this isn't about fabric. It's about freedom. It's about not bowing to China. It's about standing up for the American worker again. And we're not stopping. The crowd roared. When Karoline took the podium, she stood confidently wearing that Indiana-made dress and looked directly into the cameras. Some tried to shame us for believing in American manufacturing, for defending our own economy, for choosing jobs over jokes. Well, I say let them mock us again, because every time they do, we build back stronger. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Even hardened DC insiders began to take note. This wasn't a moment, it was a movement. Back in Hollywood, Whoopi Goldberg stayed unusually quiet. ABC executives reportedly told her to let it cool down after internal polling showed that the View's favorability had dropped sharply, particularly among independent women aged 30 to 55. One insider leaked a memo that read, "We've underestimated the cultural resonance of working-class patriotism. Do not engage Karoline Leavitt directly." But the damage had been done. A week after the American-made showcase, Karoline Leavitt was invited to speak at a conference hosted by the Heritage Foundation titled American Renewal, Reclaiming Sovereignty in a Globalized World. What was originally a policy-heavy summit quickly transformed into a nationally covered media event, with Karoline headlining a fireside conversation before a packed auditorium. But it was what happened after the speech that would send shockwaves. During the Q&A session, a journalist from MSNBC, not known for friendly coverage, posed a blunt question. Karoline, if you had the chance to say one thing directly to Whoopi Goldberg today, what would it be? There was a pause. The room tensed. Cameras zoomed in. Karoline looked directly into the camera with a calm, clear voice and responded, "I'd say thank you. Thank you for reminding America that there is still a massive disconnect between the coastal elite and the American worker. You mocked my dress, but that dress was sewn by survivors of factory closures, widows of steelworkers, veterans turned entrepreneurs. So thank you, Whoopi, for making America care again." The room erupted. It was a mic drop moment broadcast live across networks, and by the end of the night, even liberal outlets were split. Some attempted to salvage Whoopi's reputation, while others conceded that Karoline had captured something real, a sentiment that couldn't be dismissed with studio laughter and celebrity snark. Meanwhile, President Trump seized on the cultural momentum, launching a campaign called Red, White, and Built, an initiative offering tax credits and startup grants to U.S. companies that reshored manufacturing. Karoline was named the public face of the initiative, traveling state to state, meeting local makers, and appearing on primetime interviews across the political spectrum. CNN's Jake Tapper, in a surprising segment, asked her, "Do you think we're witnessing a permanent shift in how Americans think about global trade?" Karoline replied, "I think we're waking up. For too long, we exported our jobs and imported cheap promises. This isn't just economic policy. It's dignity. And we're finally reclaiming it." The numbers reflected that shift. By mid-year, American-made clothing sales were up 40%. A Gallup poll showed a dramatic swing in bipartisan support for tariffs on countries known for exploiting labor and undercutting U.S. workers, especially China. Even more shocking, The View saw its lowest ratings in a decade. Quiet whispers in Hollywood began to speculate whether Whoopi Goldberg's tenure might soon come to an end. Insiders said she had become a liability, not just because of the mockery, but because she unintentionally amplified her opponent. As for Karoline, she received a standing ovation at CAC and was later invited to guest host Hannity for a special episode called The New America First. Viewership spiked through the roof. Young conservatives hailed her as a rising star, and even some moderate Democrats admitted she had struck a nerve the establishment didn't even realize was exposed. The final blow came when Whoopi Goldberg issued a quiet, written statement through ABC, avoiding a full on-air apology but acknowledging that mocking someone's wardrobe without understanding its story was short-sighted. The statement was bland, clearly lawyer-written, and utterly lacking the fire Karoline had delivered with every public appearance. And the American people noticed. The dress, now iconic, was placed in the Smithsonian's America in the 2020s exhibit, next to displays on COVID recovery, space exploration, and the Trump-era economic reforms. It became more than fabric. It was a symbol of grit over glamour, of substance over showbiz, of America over globalist mockery. Karoline Leavitt never sought to be a fashion icon, but by wearing that made-in-China dress and owning the moment, she had sparked a reckoning and stitched her name into the cultural fabric of a new American revival.